Very good morning to you. In the first half hour of the program, John McKechnie, the Commissioner for the CCC, was in the studio talking about his concerns about mismanagement and possible corruption in local government and his concerns about regional WA. He told us broadly, not just regional WA, 700 complaints in the last year, of which about half were shown to have some validation. Maybe the tip of the iceberg, he said. There are 16 regional councils that have been deemed high risk for fraudulent practices. We had the president at Bruce Rock. I don't blame him at all for coming on and saying, well, that's not the story of our council, but there is very real concern. My guest in the studio, and welcome to those of you watching on Facebook Live, is the Premier, Mark McGowan. If you'd like to put a question to him, 1300 222 720. Mr McGowan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Geoff. Good morning to your listeners.
In that very chair, John McKechnie a little while ago spoke of his deep concern about local government in regional Western Australia. Talked about the Exmouth findings of corrupt practice, what needs to be done about it, because as I just quoted, 16 regional councils deemed high risk for fraudulent behaviour.
Well, Mr McKechnie's findings very concerning about that council, and obviously the ratepayers of Exmouth have been treated very poorly by the people they elected and also by the administration. So I sympathise with that community. The first thing we'll do is when Parliament returns, we'll introduce laws to give the Auditor-General oversight over local government. So that will mean a layer of accountability that doesn't currently exist will be introduced, so the Auditor-General can have accountability, can have the oversight capacity, as he does over government, over the entirety of local government in Western Australia. This is a long overdue reform. We'll introduce that in the first couple of weeks when Parliament resumes.
What will that power actually represent? Will it be for the Auditor-General to look at the decisions that local government makes when it comes to spending $1 million here and $1 million there? Will he want to know something about those things?
The Auditor-General's role isn't to look into the policy of a council or a government department. It isn't to look into the policy, but it's to look into whether the accountability processes were in place, whether there was any fraudulent practices, whether there was any opportunity for savings to be made. They're the sorts of roles that the Auditor-General has. So, for instance, in the case of this Exmouth, it was the $30 million that was invested by the former government into an aquarium that doesn't work in Exmouth. No doubt the Auditor-General would be able to look at how was that decision made, why was it made, were the appropriate checks and balances in place. Look, nothing is perfect, Geoff, but it's certainly a massive improvement to allow the Auditor-General oversight on councils. Look, I'm a former local government councillor. I did 3 years on the City of Rockingham back in the early 90s. I understand that the vast majority of council laws, mayors and the like, do a good job. It's often a time-consuming position. They do it for the right motives. There's obviously a small group that are doing the wrong thing. So this reform will assist with with all councils, but then we're going to have an overarching review of the Local Government Act, and we're going to introduce more transparency and accountability measures as part of that.
Any issue of amalgamation returning as an area of interest? There was a reason. There were many reasons why Colin Barnett wanted to push council amalgamations, even though his bid to do so proved very unpopular for a range of reasons. But one of those reasons was about competency.
Well, no, we're not going to introduce forced amalgamations. If councils want to come together because it suits the needs of their community, well then obviously we'd agree with councils doing that. But forcing it isn't the right way to go. Look, for me, with local councils, the most complaints I get are about the fact that one council has a different set of rules, for instance, building regulations or the like, to the council next door. I'd much rather have overarching laws that just have uniformity in relation to those areas, so there's uniformity across councils across the state. That's the area we're going to go into. Whether or not you have in Perth 30 councils or 20 councils, to me, doesn't really fix that issue.
Okay, I guess it was a reference more to what we're talking about here of small regional councils and the ability to find the people to do the jobs because of those questions that John McKechnie raised, the probity issues. How do you call someone to account when they're a friend of yours?
Well, the thing about Exmouth, and that is a real issue, how do you, because they are small communities and the CEO no doubt becomes, and they're often very vivacious agreeable people, they often become friends with the councillors, and it is hard to call to account someone who is your friend. But you've got to remember large parts of the state have a council that will represent an area the size of the ACT or the size of Tasmania. And so, amalgamating those councils just makes it even more difficult to have local representation. So in large parts of the state, very difficult to amalgamate because the areas are so large.
Okay, and just finally on that Auditor General, a couple of observations, quite rightly I think too. Is this a after the horse has bolted observation because it is only when something has gone wrong that the Auditor General inquires? Is it more that councils will know that the Auditor General will be watching? Is that what you're saying?
Right. That's right. Nothing's perfect. But the Auditor General, who is a statutory office holder, not able to be influenced by government, is a powerful position with the capacity for that sort of oversight. So if you do things that are improper, you have a very high likelihood of being caught.
Jane, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Geoff.
Jane, you have an interest here. Your husband is a councillor, I understand.
Yes, he is. And good morning to you, Premier.
Hi, Jane.
My observation is that when people elect councillors and mayors, they do so with an expectation that they will be able to hold the CEO and the bureaucracy accountable. The reality is that because of the Local Government Act and its prohibition on councillors and mayors being able to reflect negatively upon the administration, they are the least able to use words such as incompetent, or where they observe that action, they are the least able to make those comments in regards of that work being performed by the administration. And in fact, they can be prosecuted under the Act for making those negative reflections.
So they're not empowered. They're not empowered to have the voice that says, "I think what the CEO is doing is wrong."
Yes, they are very careful. They cannot use words like incompetent. There are some fairly impotent measures such as a censure motion, but really the only process by which councillors and mayors can hold CEOs accountable is their annual review, which CEOs can manipulate to have favourable councillors do that review, or something like the budget process where there is a more transparent process to hold that accountability and those decisions to be able to be commented upon. But otherwise, the Local Government Act prohibits those negative reflections. I'm
with you, Jane. Now, is that a problem? And again, it's I don't want this conversation to be about the city of Perth, but again, those questions of transparency and the ease with which people can speak out or not speak out or should speak or mustn't speak, is that a problem in local government?
Well, that would be subject to the review of the Local Government Act we've announced, and I do believe in transparency and accountability. Often, if people do have serious concerns, Jane, they can make complaints to the organisations like the CCC. That's what it's there for, and I suspect that's what's happened in the case of Exmouth. But those sorts of opportunities are there, but it's always a balance between you don't want a completely dysfunctional council where everyone's fighting with one another. You want respectful relationships. But at the same time, if there's impropriety or people not meeting the terms of their employment conditions, there should be the opportunity for councillors to be able to deal with that effectively, efficiently and quickly.